Welcome to the inaugural episode of Talent Strategy 60. This is your friendly neighborhood talent strategy nerd, Dr. Jim, and I am joined today with my co-host, the perpetually well-coiffed Nathan Ross. Don't ask me to say that twice or even three times because I'll screw it up. So this is going to be a lot of fun. This is our first show. We are operating without a net. So we had some technical difficulties early on because somebody forgot to hit the go live option on the display.
Oh, that way.
And it's not the guy with the good hair. So so now that we are up and running, I want to welcome Nathan to the show. I want to welcome everybody that is watching. It's going to be a lot of fun in terms of this conversation, and we're operating without a net. So there are going to be some pop flies that show up that we'll be curious to see how that gets handled. So to give everybody that's listening a good idea of how or what we're going to talk about. One of the things that we're going to try to establish in this show is really the reasons behind why we're actually doing the show in the first place, and also set the stage for all of our subsequent shows when it comes to the things that we're going to talk about. And you're going to get a really good understanding about who we are as people, what we care about, what the expertise is that we bring to the table. And you're also going to learn a little bit about the whole purpose of the show, given what we are seeing in the overall landscape. So there's a lot of stuff that we're going to cover in this conversation. And if any of it resonates with you as we're going through the conversation, make sure you are dropping a comment in the chat so that either Nathan or I can respond. I think a good starting place for us to kick the show off is really give the audience an opportunity to understand who we are as people and what we care about, and then we'll dive into sort of the underlying basis for the show, and even get into some solutioning a little bit later. So that's going to be interesting as well. So first things first, I think it's important that I yield the floor to the young senator from Milwaukee. Senator Ross, welcome to the show. Why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself, who you are,
Absolutely.
what you care about. Feel free to throw in your average mile pace if you want to do that. There's a lot of
Much
ground.
faster than yours, I might add.
Hey, man, I'm the fastest Ewok that you have ever seen. So just leave me alone. Don't start dogging about my pace. But this isn't about me. It's about you. So I'm yielding the floor. Lay it out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Jim, so happy to be here with you. Happy Friday, everyone. Great day to be talking about talent strategy and talent in general. And just to give everyone a little bit of background on me, I have a corporate sales and professional and personal development background, such a um, just mindset and people acceleration. And I really do believe that we as humans have unlimited potential. And so when we're talking about talent strategy, learning best practices from industry leaders, it just sparks a lot of curiosity on my end, and just happy to be here with you today, Jim. And I really do look forward to all the episodes that are coming up here and just all the great guests that we're going to be having.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. I think one of the things that you sort of left out is pretty important to this conversation. I mean, we're in the talent strategy space, and I think it's important to get into some of your background as far as what you've done previously and how that's kind of led you to this point in time. Tell us a little bit about sort of your coaching background and where you're at now. I mean, full disclosure, you and I are colleagues, so we're going to get into that in a little bit as
Absolutely.
well. Get the audience up to speed on that as well, because I think it's going to be relevant to a lot of the things that we talk about.
Yeah, so before joining my role here at Circa, I had my own coaching business for the previous 5 years and taught, mentored, developed just people across many different professions. But at the end of the day, it just dove deep into personal psychology and really figuring out what a lot of individuals want the most out of life and how can they create a plan in their lives to get that way. And I think when we start talking about talent or talent development and retention strategies, DE&I, it really led me to this new journey in my life, which is working for Circa. And here at Circle, we believe that diverse teams have the power to transform business, and that's something that just authentically resonates with me. And I see it in the lifeblood here at the organization. And it's something that I feel like is just a game changer among not only our business, but many other businesses that we work with. And it's something that I want to continue to explore here on the show for sure.
Yeah, and that's a great lead into some of the things that you're talking about. I mean, we're going to definitely have topics down the road where we're talking about professional development and individual development plans and how that can be a game changer when it comes to solving some of the retention challenges that organizations are dealing with. So thanks for laying that out. I want to take this opportunity to kind of give people a little bit of insight into my background. I think for those of you who have known me for any time on LinkedIn or through the Cascading Leadership podcast, I'm not lying when I say I'm a talent talent strategy nerd. So I'm one of those odd ducks that actually lives this stuff. My doctoral research is on employee retention and turnover and essentially why people join and leave organizations. So a lot of my worldview is shaped through that lens. When you look at organizational problems in general, a lot of it can be boiled down to your people strategy. And one of the interesting things about people strategy in general is that you'll see a lot of organizations who have a talent strategy that's built out, and oftentimes at the desk level, a lot of that talent gets left behind, and that's part of the reason why it's part of my LinkedIn headline is don't let the talent in your talent strategy get left behind is really something that I'm pretty passionate about. And then the guests that we have that we're going to be bringing on are going to be talking in depth about all sorts of different talent strategy topics. So whether you're talking about talent attraction, hiring, onboarding, upskilling and reskilling, retention. If you happen to deal in the compliance space, we're going to have conversations about that stuff too. So it's going to be a wide ranging number of topics that we talk about in terms of the discussion. So with and certainly for those that are who are watching the show, if you have comments or questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. Either Nathan or I will respond, and maybe if there's something that is conversation worthy, we can bring it up and handle it on the fly in the show as well. So that is available to you. So make sure you are dropping your comments or questions in the chat, and welcome aboard as you're listening in. I think one of the things that's going to be helpful for everybody is to lay out some context. And in terms of the whole reason why we're even doing the show. And I'm going to tie it together this way. One of the people that I follow on a regular basis everywhere is Simon Sinek, and I think everybody is familiar with his concept of the golden circle, and in particular, his whole concept of explaining or starting with why. And in broad terms, basically, it's how instinctually your brain makes decisions. You have the how, the what, and the why, and anybody can answer the how and the what, but if the why isn't satisfied at a subconscious level, you're going to get stalled in your decision making process. And I think for us, when we're talking about this particular show, it's important to lay out the why first. So I'm going to hand this back off to you, Nathan. And I think it's important. We kind of thought this up in a couple of weeks ago, and the intent here was just to, get creative and have some really interesting conversations. And we talk about, sort of this sort of stuff all the time. And I think it's important for you to kind of give us an idea of what were the big things that you were looking at as reasons for partnering with me on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Jim, it's an interesting time to be in an HR type of realm. Just with the changing landscape, everything with COVID, everything with this looming recession that's happening. I mean, I don't know if you saw on LinkedIn today, but there is the headline of the July jobs report, and there is this huge uptick in hiring again. And it kind of went against the grain of what you're hearing with the looming recession coming in the not too distant future. And so it's just an interesting time too, I think, with so many baby boomers leaving the job market and this huge talent gap that we do face. I mean, not only in the US, but all over the world. And it's just an interesting time to talk about, well, what can we do to attract new talent and retain the talent that we do have, and also upscale them into new roles that are continuously evolving through different technology platforms and just technology in general. And I mean, there's just so much of a changing landscape that I feel like it's a good thing to be talking about, to get more people involved in this conversation and just to be able to learn from one another and to implement at our own pace and at our, I don't know, at our organization's best interest to lead our people in the right direction. I think that's what really brought me to the show and really kind of enticed me to come on here with you.
Yeah, and that's some good perspective, and I think I'm going to pull some additional detail into that as well. I mean, I think one of the big things that I want to be able to communicate is we've seen this before. And regardless of how you define what's currently going on, there's some question about whether we're in a recession or not in a recession or not yet. That's really immaterial to the discussion, because I think you can look around in your networks and you can see the landscape for what it is. And the fact of the matter is that you have a lot of people who are getting laid off, a lot of people who are transitioning out of certain industries, a lot of people who are switching careers into areas that are more suitable for their personal and professional needs and goals, and that's all setting the stage for something that's coming. And we've seen it before. I think I've been a part of 2 or 3 recessions. Nathan, I think you're in that same neighborhood, and it all follows a similar pattern. You have some early stage layoffs and some cost cutting and tightening up the belt exercises that are done in the broader world of work at the corporate level. And when we look at what this show is targeted, or who this show is targeted for, it's targeting that talent strategy community. And what typically happens when there's an economic upheaval or downturn, anybody that's in that talent strategy space sees a handful of things that happen. They see that, their budgets get cut. They see that their resourcing gets cut. They see any number of downstream impacts. They're probably the ones that are dealing with layoffs. So whether you're talking about the talent attraction side, the learning and development side, anywhere, the retention side, anywhere in between those, you have these things happen, but the expectations in terms of results don't change. The common phrase is you got to do more with less. And that's what's going to be happening if the current economic trends continue. Those talent leaders in all sorts of different industries are going to be faced with a problem where they're continually being told to do more with less. But what's interesting, and this is the opportunity that you and I were talking about, is that we have an ability now to leverage sort of the community intelligence or collective intelligence of all of these different leaders that are around the country, and bring in their expertise and their best practices to help the broader talent strategy community elevate what they're doing from a results perspective. So instead of just trying to figure it out on your own on how can you possibly do more with less, you're in this scenario now where you will have some of the best practitioners in the country coming in and sharing their frameworks for success. So that's really when I think about, hey, how can we impact what's coming for the talent strategy leaders that we deal with in HR, in sales, in marketing, in IT, in those functional groups. this is one of those ways where we can leverage that collective or community intelligence to really change the game in what these leaders are able to do. So I don't know if you had something that you wanted to add. You look like you were about to say something, and I tend to dominate conversation, so I'm going to be quiet.
No, all good. I mean, I really do think though that for the show moving forward, one of the main intentions that Jim and I do have is to bring on industry experts to really just share what's working for them, what's not working for them, and really trying to add as much value as we can to the community to be able to answer questions, to provide feedback, to give you new avenues of thought to go down, to maybe approach your own situation in just a little bit of a different viewpoint and bring some creativity into what you're doing to hire talent, to retain talent. And I think it's our responsibility, or we're taking that on for the show, as to be a place where we can bring on people with a solid point of view. And I'm excited to learn from some of these individuals and to really just gain some new perspective and insight myself, and just continue to foster the conversation and keep it moving forward, Jim.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I think there's going to be a lot of impact, and I'm not lying when I say I'm a big nerd. That's one of my favorite things about the Cascading Leadership podcast that I host is I have all of these really interesting people that have their points of view and perspectives that I'm always picking stuff up from them in the course of those conversations. And this is going to be more of the same. So when we're looking at the mission of the show is to help talent strategy professionals in whatever area of expertise they happen to be in really level up their game in terms of delivering outcomes in a resource independent way. So if you're in an environment where your resources have been constrained, this is a great way to leverage what I call the community intelligence or collective intelligence to help advance those initiatives that you care about and that you're passionate about. And certainly you want to continue driving your career forward. And you can't really do that. You got to get scrappy. And this is one of the ways that you can do that. So with that being said, I want to talk a little bit about what can we impact right now on this show. So if there's any questions from anybody that is in the audience, feel free to drop those in the chat, and we'll go ahead and answer those as they come up. But I think one of the things that I want to call out right now is that if you're tracking with kind of what we're saying from a overall concept and mission perspective, make sure you like or drop a comment or engage with the broadcast. So that way you can, so that way we know that we're on the right track in terms of what we're trying to serve. So definitely appreciate that aspect if you can do that. So I want to switch gears and do a little bit of solutioning. So we're, the show is Talent Strategy 60. And normally it's going to be an hour-long conversation. In this inaugural episode, we're going to keep it kind of short and sweet. But we want to troubleshoot some things that you might be dealing with that we can immediately solution. So I think one of the first things that I wanted to, I'm curious about, Nathan, your background really falls in the area of personal and professional development, and you have a lot of coaching experience under your belt as well. So when you look at that experience, what are some of the challenges that you see from a talent strategy perspective that can be impacted by some of the things that you have experience in solutioning? I know that you're pretty passionate about helping existing teams or leaders grow, and that comes from your coaching experience. So tell us a little bit about some of the common problems that organizations might be seeing from a development or retention perspective, and what are some things that they can do right now to solve those problems?
Yeah, I mean, I really do believe, and the data speaks for itself, but I mean, it's a job seekers market out there, and we're seeing so many individuals leave certain organizations, whether that's for higher pay, better benefits, a different company culture. And I think what that all boils back down to is investing in your current staff. And one way to invest in your current staff is to truly find out what they're interested in. And one thing that I think is pretty essential in this day and age is that work life integration is something that with technology, with working from home, you really have to look at your talent very holistically. And there has to be an approach to them, not only in a professional way, but also important matters that are to them personally happening. And I think when you start to dive a little bit deeper into what's truly important with the staff that I have, with my employee base, and what can I do to provide, whether that's different training, whether that's upskilling in a certain area, just the more that you can authentically know who your staff is, just the employee base as a whole, the more you're going to be able to speak to their needs, and the more that they're going to have buy-in that, listen, this organization, they not only care about me as an employee, but as a person as well. And it's something that I feel like it is important, not only just from a professional level, but just as an overall life level. And what a better way to create a company culture than to truly invest in your employees.
So that's a good point. And from a high level, I agree with you. But not but and I think it's important to kind of dig into that a little bit deeper.
Yeah.
When you're looking at, hey, here's the landscape that you're dealing with. People might be leaving your organization. People might be feeling disconnected. You as a leader within that organization need to build more effective relationships with the people on your team. What is something that a lot of what are some examples of things that organizations ignore that could change that game if you consistently adopt it, let's say next week? Give us some examples of what a manager or leader could be doing to
Mhm.
build those better connections and encourage more engagement from the people on their team.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like for many past organizations in which I worked, we were always talking about the business's bottom line. And I'd be sitting in these quarterly meetings or just annual meetings, and it was all about the business, right? And I know we're working for a company and we're pushing bottom line results for that organization, but I'd be sitting back thinking, how is this tying to my own personal bottom line? And when you, as a leader or a manager, can start to really find out what's important to the individuals that are on your team, what's truly driving them outside of that work environment, that's where I feel a little bit of magic can happen. And when you can bring some of those real world examples in their outside of work life into those work conversations, that's where you can really start exploring people's motivations and start talking about what truly drives some of the individuals on your team.
So you just hit on something that I am, kind of a bananas person on, which is this whole idea of what's in it for me.
A
I'm
bananas
all
person.
well, yeah. I mean, like make you
Okay.
go bananas.
All right.
So I stop sidetracking me, Nathan Ross.
All right. Sorry. Didn't mean to do that. Continue on with the flow.
So this is what happens when we operate without a net. Nathan
That's
will throw
right.
a curveball in there, and I'll start giggling. No, but I think one of the things that you mentioned that's really important is when you're looking at um, really connecting business outcomes to individual outcomes or goals. That's got to be an integrated effort. And this is one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about with my team and just in general. There's a company brand and there's a personal brand, and in the magic happens when those things can be integrated. And that's one of the reasons why I'm like completely uh, I'm a talent strategy evangelist at Circa because of that. Because we are an organization that, and one of my colleagues said it perfectly yesterday when we were talking to a client. We're here to change the world, and that's not language that I would normally use, but it's actually in my mindset in terms of why I'm here. And when you have a scenario where the mission, vision, values, and purpose of an organization aligns with the personal mission, vision, values, you have some magic that happens there where it can shift the relationship from just, hey, this is a job to this is my purpose. And the key thing that you're referencing is, you know, one thing that a manager could or should be doing, or at least this is my interpretation of what you're saying. Every conversation that a manager has with their reports should be focused on how are you every day connecting the mission, vision, values, and purpose of the organization to the personal mission, vision, values, and purpose of the individual. And that's how I interpreted what you said. How do you respond to that?
No, I completely agree. And I mean, even to the fact of just asking someone, how are you doing? How are you doing? It doesn't even have to be around the business or work or whatever, but when you can start to just create those interpersonal relationships, there's magic that happens between colleagues. And like you're talking about too, just getting back to the underlying mission, vision, values. And when you're aligning those overarching values of the organization and they speak to the individuals at that organization, that is, like you said, a recipe for magic. I completely agree, Jim.
So we're kind of talking, and I'm sure there are people in the audience that are sitting there thinking, okay, well, that's great. Mission, vision, values. This is all purpose. This is all like fuzzy, touchy feely stuff. How do you actually execute and build connection to that with people on the team? What have you seen that works well in building that connection? Because honestly, like unless one of the core roles of leadership is to build that connection with your reports, but also help foster a connection between between the individual and the mission of the organization. So, what are some things that could be done on a week to week basis that helps foster that connection, both at the personal level and at the professional level? That often gets missed, and I'll say that out loud too.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question. And I think it's something that I'm looking forward to listening to different perspectives on that basis. I mean, I don't know if I have that answer for you off the top of my head. On a weekly basis, I do feel that it does boil back down to having authentic conversations and being able to build that rapport with the people that you work with and having that open dialogue for people to share. And I think just having the underlying vibe of I I intrinsically care about you as a person. I mean, when you can start baking some of that into an organization, that's when you can really start finding a tight knit group of people who are working towards a common goal.
Yeah, and that's a day to day thing, but I think the other thing that often gets missed, where organizations can really impact their retention and turnover challenges that they might be facing, is every week your leadership should be pretty consistent in having one on ones, and part of those one on ones should be reorienting and tracking progress against hey, these are the things that you said that were important to you as both as a career professional, both as a professional and as an individual. How can we help advance those goals? I think that's an under utilized element of that vision or purpose alignment.
And Jim, I know you're big at that within your management philosophy and style. I just wanted to ask you, where did you develop that from? Where how did that come into play for you and become an important aspect of your philosophy?
So hopefully some people that are going to hear this are going to have their earmuffs on, but I don't know. It developed over time. I think when I was an early career leader, um, I just simply got tired about talking about numbers every single week.
Yeah.
Like every one-on-one is, what did you do? And how many of this, that, or the other thing did you get done? And that's got to be part of a one-on-one. I mean, that accountability conversation is part of it. But I think it goes back to, what I referenced earlier in the show, which is the Simon Sinek component of, you got to align um, your whys across the board. And if people don't understand, or if you're not connected to the broader purpose for yourself, no amount of prodding on an arbitrary set of numbers is really going to get you to really, go beyond what's necessary. And it's just something that, and you know what, I get bored with those sort of conversations anyways. Like, there's only so many different times that you can talk about numbers, and if that's all you talk about, um, it's kind of a boring conversation. And people end up, I've been on the other end of it, where I've sat there and people are talking to me about production numbers, and it's either, oh, okay, am I walking into a browbeating, or is this going to be good based on where I am at a given week? And really, that doesn't create psychological safety in terms of having the conversations that you need to have to build an effective team. And look, everybody's a work in progress. And it's something that I constantly have to work at too. But you have to build that discipline over time. And I think having those broader vision conversations is a lot more productive if that's integrated with that accountability conversation.
Well, you know what I think is interesting too is that, I mean, being in the millennial demographic myself, is that millennials are starting to become the largest demographic in the workforce. And when I look at my own personal interests, I thought I was unique, but what it turns out is that most millennials feel the exact same way that I feel, that they value diversity. They want to be putting their time and effort into something that truly matters, that has authentic intrinsic value, and they feel that within what they're doing in a professional landscape on a daily basis. And I think that goes back just to your point of, these conversations do need to shift, and they do need to change to align with the overall values of the largest, or soon to be largest, demographic in the workforce.
You bring up a really interesting point about the demographic landscape, especially when it comes to the leadership tiers and also the overall employment or candidate marketplace tiers. When you take the millennial demographic and you take the Generation Z demographic, those two together represent the biggest workforce demographics that exist. And depending on where they fall, a lot of them are moving into leadership, and a lot of them are moving to mid and senior levels of expertise when it comes to their career development. One of the things that I'm curious about, piggybacking on our previous conversation, I'm curious if there are people that are watching who have some best practices from a one-on-ones perspective that's really impacted their ability to build a cohesive team culture. Drop those in the chat so we can talk about those in depth. But the other thing that I want to point out when we're talking about demographics and how that impacts the world of work, with millennials and Generation Z largely becoming the largest segment of the employee and leadership landscapes, there's some implications to people in positions of hiring or organizations that are looking to advance their initiatives. And I think I'm not sure if a lot of organizations are actually tuned in to no generation or no demographic operates as a monolith. I think that's important to say, but the data is pretty clear in terms of demonstrating what's important to large segments, almost 75% of the employee landscape, in terms of what they look for when they're making a decision to join or leave an organization. And you hinted at it, diversity is a big part of it. And there's a number of research studies that are out there, and other data points that are out there that points to up to 75% of the employee landscape are making those join or leave decisions based on where an organization, or how diverse an organization is is diverse. So
Mhm. I
I
mean,
think. Oh, go
one
ahead.
one thing that I wanted to ask you on the whole diversity topic is why do you think that is? Why do you think it? Why diversity? Why diversity? Why does diversity matter to you, Jim? I mean, and why do you think we're seeing this as a trend and something that's truly important?
Well, I mean, so I don't claim to have all the answers on any of that stuff. I know that some of
That's why
you
we're
who,
having the guests, Jim. That's why we're having the guests.
well, I'm sure some of the people who know me really well are going to be like sitting back in their chair and saying, Jim actually says that he doesn't know something about something. Wow, that's like I gotta mark that on my bingo card. Um, so, uh, I it's an interesting question. Why does all of that, why does diversity matter in the large screen, in the grand scheme of things? That's a really important question. I think before we tackle the answer to that question,
Mhm.
I think we should properly define what diversity is, because in some contexts, people have a reaction to even the word as if it's some bad thing, and just break it down into just racial and gender categories that I don't think are really productive. It's interesting. I actually had one of our colleagues had an interesting exchange a little while back, and I ended up writing about it because I write about everything. And it ended up being one of the most engaged posts that I had, where somebody that he was talking to, he reached out to about diversity hiring initiatives, and this person responded, "Well, whatever happened to?" And I'm paraphrasing, "Whatever happened to just hiring based on skill and capability?" And whether we like to admit it or not, there's still that belief there that if you're not in the majority group, you're somehow lesser. And that just glosses over what diversity actually means. It's not simply about race or gender. There's age components that come into it. There is veteran status. There is identity elements that come to it. There's a whole gamut of things, and none of that, regardless of where you fall in any of those categories, none of it means lesser than, greater than. What it allows for organizations to do is leverage that collective intelligence, that community intelligence that we referenced earlier in the show, because when you have different viewpoints that are in an organization, that's really where the innovation and acceleration comes from. If you have single-minded thinking, you never think differently about anything. And you kind of get in this groupthink environment where you don't really make any sort of progress on things that are important to you at the organizational level or at the division level. And I think that's where diversity comes in and why it's important. And I don't know what happened between Gen X, which I'm a part of, and millennials. I think I've said this before in stuff that I've written. Millennials and Generation Z get a bad rap because they're the first couple of generations that have actually taken agency in their own careers and in their own personal life and set boundaries on what's important. And it's largely on their efforts that you've seen this dramatic shift in what organizations are prioritizing from a diversity perspective. So I don't know what it is in those demographics that triggered it. I think it might have something to do with the fact that when millennials were largely graduating college, you had a massive recession. And then when millennials were later on in their career, they were faced with a scenario where you had the housing crash. And during both of those instances, millennials saw their parents, who had demonstrated exceptional loyalty to the organizations that they worked for. Their parents got laid off. So you had all of that churn, and then you recover. And then you have another instance where you had another economic upheaval where their lives got turned upside down. And that tends to lead to different viewpoints on how society or business should be ordered in relation to the employee. So I kind of went off on a pretty big soapbox there, but I want to give you a chance to kind of chime in and respond to that.
No, I mean, I definitely agree that you brought up some good points, and I feel like the millennial and Gen Z have also grown up in this different environment with so much access to so many different viewpoints. I'm walking around with an iPhone in your pocket didn't that trend didn't start until 2007. And to be able to have that much access to information, to the world, to multiple different viewpoints, to multiple different races, to multiple different environments, I think that really has shaped the demographic as a whole.
Yep. And I totally agree. So let's tackle another issue and see how we can solution it. So one of the things that we see all the time in the talent attraction space, and prior to joining Circa, I spent time within a coaching organization, and prior to that, I built an IT staffing division from the ground up. So I've been heavily involved in the talent acquisition space throughout my career. So I've actually generally operated in either a talent acquisition capacity on the agency side, or I've actually been involved in the technology space that had a talent strategy component to it. So it's accounted for a big portion of kind of my professional life. But one of the things that we see even now is you have employers and hiring managers who are always, noting that, hey, I have these open positions, I'm looking to hire, but I can never get enough candidates for my roles. And there's some things from a solutioning perspective that people in positions of hiring should be looking at that can immediately change the game when it comes to attracting more candidates. And I'm going to throw out some facts here. So, generally speaking, when you look at a position description, that position can often come open because there's a retirement or somebody left the organization. So that's a separate issue. It leads into succession planning and those sort of questions and your retention strategy. But let's just take a look at the position description in general. When you look at the typical position description, and for those of you who have seen this in real time, drop a comment in the chat so we can actually incorporate that into the conversation. But more often than not, when you're looking at a position description, it's like 6 roles in one. Now, I'm being hyperbolic, but you get the idea. And the reality of it is that the fact that the role is laid out in such a way from a description perspective that it seems super complex, you're actually excluding a vast majority of the applicant population from even applying. And here's where that comes from. So when you're looking at underrepresented communities, so people that are like me, but more or any underrepresented community, if they look at a job position, and I'm not trying to be monolithic in how I'm talking, but if they look at a job position, a description, and they don't determine internally that they're somewhere in the neighborhood of an 80 to 90% fit, they won't apply. So if you're struggling with a candidate applicant issue, you really need to look at how that position description is constructed and designed to encourage people to apply. Because if it's over engineered and you're looking for a kitchen sink as far as the job, people aren't going to apply. That's one thing that you could do tomorrow that would impact your candidate volume or velocity from an applicant perspective. Nathan, what have you seen from an applicant volume or an application volume perspective that you think would be helpful when it comes to designing the position descriptions?
I mean, a huge one that comes to mind for me is branding. When you can brand yourself as a diverse organization, as an organization which invests in its people, puts their people first, what you're doing is you're sending a message for someone who's scrolling through many different open roles. It's a job seeker's market right now. There's 2 open positions for every one job seeker. It's amazing. But when you can start to really use certain tools to help you brand yourself that speaks to the target demographic that you're looking to attract, that's going to help people apply to those roles as well and pique their interest, and also just separate you from the pack to just do something a little bit different there.
So you brought up something, and I had my typical dumb grin on my face when you said it, and that was, how do you stop the scroll? It's something that we talk about all the time, and I think that's an
Mhm.
important concept in even how position descriptions are laid out. You have to stop the scroll. There are thousands of positions that are open, and one of the people that I've interviewed for the Cascading Leadership Show is Andy Paul. And one of the things that he talks about is basically how sales professionals can stand out from their competition. And the phrase that he uses is, how are you rising above the sea of sameness? So
Mhm.
if you're posting positions and on the one hand, they're super complex, your applicants are going to bail. The other hand, the other element that you just referenced is, how are you branding yourself and rising above the sea of sameness against your competition? And that's an important concept too. I would also add that you can't, and Maya Winston, who is one of the senior DEI leaders at O9 Solutions, they're a pre-IPO startup. And one of the interesting things that Maya has done within that organization is that she's embedded DEI as almost a critical success factor in that organization's ability to accelerate growth. And we're talking about a startup tech company. But one of the things that she often talks about is that you can't have your diversity initiatives be performative. So it's not enough to just brand and create the optics. I mean, that's a start, but you have to be intentional about all the downstream stuff that you're doing as part of an entire talent strategy. Now, when so we talked about, hey, how are you designing position descriptions? We talk about how are you rising above the sea of sameness. There's a couple of other things that you can do too if you're looking at increasing candidate flow or applicant flow. You certainly need to look at, okay, job requirement fit, and in particular degree requirements, because there are a lot of roles that are posted that require degrees that exclude large amounts of the population that don't have degrees, that are perfectly qualified to take on the position. I've actually I actually wrote about this earlier in the week, where there people have been conditioned to believe that just because we have a degree, it's going to present this panacea of opportunities. And what do we see? We see large segments of the population that have college degrees that have a hard time finding work, and you have a lot of positions that don't necessarily need degrees that are requiring them for who knows what. Like sales is a great example, where there's so many sales roles that are open that require degrees, and I'm always thinking, well, why? That isn't a prerequisite for success. So that's another thing that employers could be doing, is really examining what are the appropriate credentialing requirements for you to be in the game. I actually dealt with this when I was in staffing. I would, and I did IT staffing. So I was providing IT resources, which are extremely rare for clients. And there were clients of mine that would not even look at somebody that was absolutely qualified, absolutely delivered on the initiatives that were important to them. But because they didn't have a piece of paper, I couldn't even get them an interview. And it drove me bonkers. It was absolutely frustrating, because when I look at my recruitment strategy, it was outcomes based recruiting. And I can't think of the name of the person that actually deploys this, but those in the recruitment community know who I'm referencing when I talk about outcomes based recruitment. That's actually a better recipe for success. You ask the organization, what are you trying to deliver? And then you go and find the people that have delivered those outcomes throughout their career. And those are your best fits for the role. So I would recruit based on that and consistently deliver talent, but because they didn't have a piece of paper, wouldn't be considered. So if you're struggling with applicant flow, look at your degree requirements and really ask yourself, is that something that is critical for success in this role? And if you're talking about a developer, or if you're talking about a technical person, or if you're talking about a salesperson, there's any number of things, functions that might not actually require degrees as part and parcel of the job. So the fourth thing, so we've talked about Make sure, if you want to increase your applicant flow, make sure, one, your position descriptions are actually clean and encouraging people to apply. So don't overcomplicate it by including like 6 different roles in one. Two, you have to stand out from the sea of sameness. And Nathan, you talked about it. How are you branding yourself as an organization that people want to work for? And bear in mind, 75% of the workforce, millennials and Generation Z, are making their join or leave decisions with organizations based on how diverse those organizations are. Am I going to be able to find community within this organization? Are there people that look like me, think like me, welcome me in this organization? And you might not ever get that answer, but if you get a kicked offer and somebody else takes a different offer, you need to look at, okay, am I aligned in a way that represents the communities that I serve? 3, examine your degree requirements. Are they legitimately necessary for the job to be done? So that's 3 things that you can do tomorrow. And I would argue 4 is you need to look at, okay, are there skilled and capable candidates who have transferable skills that I'm excluding? And the perfect example that I have tons of in my network are transitioning teachers. Like, if you really break down the jobs that teachers do, and they're leaving the education sector in droves for all sorts of different reasons. But think about the functional skills that they bring to the table: project management. They have to convince kids to stay on task. I mean, I think that's harder than convincing a CEO to invest in something. So that right there is worth something. That's like negotiation skills, multitasking, all of the different roles that they handle. But often I hear it from people in my network all the time where who are transitioning teachers, they are having a hard time even finding entry-level sales positions. And I know absolutely for a fact that from a work rate and motor and just general EQ related skills, they could totally handle that job and transition into any number of related fields. So you need to consider, okay, what non-traditional applicants are you ignoring based on how your jobs are designed, how your degree requirements are? So there's 4 things right there that you could do that you could change tomorrow that would have a tremendous impact in terms of your ability to find qualified candidates to do the job. That's a second soapbox of the day. So buckle up, folks.
All good. A lot of truth in that too, Jim. I mean, one other thing that I just wanted to add, maybe number 5, would be start to think about how are you attracting these candidates? Are you meeting them where they are? Have you thought about diversifying how you're presenting your organization? And where I think there's a level of meeting people where they're at. And as we see with this technology revolution that we're all living through, is things are getting more and more niched down. If you look on if you're looking for anything on the internet, you're going to find a community that has a whole tribe around whatever interest that is. And that's including the candidates in which you're looking for open positions. There's there's pools of candidates out there who have their own tribe, and it's up to you as a employer to be able to go out and find where they are and diversify some of your outreach efforts to attract the right type of talent that you're looking to have come to your organization.
Great point, Nathan. All right. So we are approaching the back end of the conversation. And so far, it's been a really fun discussion at a high level for the launch of the show. I think for those who are tuning in, it would certainly be appreciated if you give us your feedback. This show will be replaying, but I initially said that we might not go the full hour, and 54 minutes later, we're almost at the hour. So it was a lot of fun chatting. I am looking forward to future shows. In fact, next week, we are going to have a monster show, that will be our first guest. And we're going to be bringing in Becky Chung of Cielo Talent. She is, I think her official title is Global Director of Talent Acquisition. And breaking news, folks, she's actually legit one of the top 50 talent acquisition professionals in the US. And the topic that we're going to be talking about, and it ties right into some of the stuff that Nathan and I were talking about, was how do you build an award-winning talent acquisition team? So if you're dealing with the problem of, hey, we aren't effective from a people perspective or a process perspective in our talent acquisition capability, well, Becky's going to be a great person to have on the show to talk about, okay, how do you build that from the ground up? And she's done that in multiple spaces. So I've known her for quite a while. She actually did this at an accelerating growth startup that had some acquisitions that went on, and she's won recognition for her for the work that she's done at Cielo. So that's going to be a really fun topic to get into, and I think everybody should tune in next week when we launch that. So as we wind down, I think a couple things that I want to make sure that we do. First things first, Nathan, if people want to get a hold of you, where can they find you?
Easiest place is here on LinkedIn. Just send me a message, Nathan Ross on LinkedIn. Would be more than happy to discuss any sort of topic with you. And one thing that I wanted to mention too is that we're all in this together, folks. We're building this channel. This is our little niche of the internet. So if you have any recommendations on people you'd like to see on the show, topics you'd like to see discussed, any sort of interest that you might have, drop a comment, reach out to myself, Jim, on a one-off basis, and we're here to serve you to build this community in the best way that we know how. And the best way that I know how is together with all of you.
Yep. Great. Well said, Nathan. And you left out some other places where people can find you. You can certainly find him on TikTok. He does some awesome TikTok dances. No, not really. But you can find him on TikTok.
That is false.
You can definitely find him there. You can also, he is the co-founder and co-host of Talent Strategy 60. So definitely check out our page. Go ahead and follow there. We will be posting content there on a regular basis. For those who aren't connected with me yet and are watching this, you can find me on the Talent Strategy 60 page. You can find me on Cascading Leadership. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm on TikTok. I'm on YouTube. I'm everywhere.
Jim's on everything.
I'm not on Instagram because that's only for food pics. So that's I have to draw a line somewhere. And I'm not on Twitter because I don't have that much time in between my 17 different jobs that I do. But you can find me in all those places. Really looking forward to our weekly shows. And I'm super pumped to have some of the country's best practitioners across any number of topics coming in. And we have shows planned all the way through mid to late September and on an ongoing basis. So this should be a lot of fun. So again, thanks everybody for joining us. And we are wrapping up episode 1.
All right.
Episode 1 of Talent Strategy 60. How cool is that, Nathan?
Amazing. Thanks everyone for tuning in today. Appreciate it.
Thanks everybody for tuning in. Have a good weekend. Hop on our page, like and follow us, and do all the things that the kids are doing. And we are out.